Hello, thanks for clicking on the video and joining us. Over the course of the past week, and what I'm sure will be many weeks to come, we're readjusting how we communicate and reach out to each other. It's fascinating relearning how to continue our relationships with one another without the very important component of getting together face to face. But even before we started implementing social distancing, the truth of the matter is that we as a society have been moving towards more and more online communication. Believe it or not, there are more than 2 billion people over 65 different social media apps and growing. There's so much that you can feel overwhelmed and even pressured to try to keep up. And each app has their own niche need that they provide or say that they meet. Today, we're jumping in with lesson 4 from Loving Your Neighbor, Being Kind on Social Media. Where do you fit into all of this? And at what point do you just feel overwhelmed and exhausted trying to learn about all that the internet has to offer and all the different things and ways that people communicate? What I want us to talk about today is what environment have we allowed to grow up around us online? When it comes to our environments, whether online or not, we can react to it in one of 2 ways. Either influencing it through our own speech and actions, or allowing other people's speech and actions to influence us. And that leads us to asking, what does God think about all of this? What type of environment does God expect for us to surround ourselves with and spend time investing in? Paul talks about this idea in Philippians chapter 4, verses 8 through 9. If you've got a Bible, go ahead and open it up and follow along and read in your version as well. Starting in verse 8, Paul writes to the church at Philippi saying, "Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Whatever you've learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put into practice, and the God of peace will be with you." This passage can be broken down into 2 different parts. The first being, what should we fill our online environment with? Now, why do I make that jump, you ask? Well, in that first part of the text, Paul talks about what are the things that we spend thinking about. And odds are, when we're interacting online, whatever we're reading, whatever we're viewing, it's going to affect or influence the way we think about such things. So let's look at the first part of that passage again at verse 8. Paul writes, "Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things." In order to understand these things that God desires us to fill our minds with, and therefore hopefully fill our environment with as they influence the way we think, we actually need to know what they are. So let's break each one of them down real quick. The first thing is whatever is true. What is true, or truth in this context? Well, in this context, it's something that's unconcealed. It's something that's true in fact, or something that's worthy of credit. So we need to make sure that as we're online, we're surrounding ourselves with the truth. Next, he mentions whatever is noble. In this context, whatever is noble includes those things that are honorable, those things that are dignified. So online, we need to make sure that what we're reading, what we're viewing, the things that we're interacting with are honorable and dignified. Next, that which is right. In this sense, the idea of right is that which is innocent and holy. And there's a whole lot to interact with online that doesn't meet that bill. So we need to make sure that what we're watching and interacting with is indeed innocent and holy. Next, that which is pure. In this case, it's something that's clean, something that's innocent, and even in the context of the Greek here, that which is modest. Now, I don't have to tell you, there's an awful lot of immodesty on the internet, but we need to make sure that if we're trying to think about things that are modest, that are clean, that are innocent, we need to make sure that we don't view or interact with things that aren't. Next, he mentions that which is lovely. That is, those things that are pleasing, acceptable, or grateful. Next is admirable, those which are things spoken in kindly spirit. And finally, things that are excellent or praiseworthy. Those things are upright, virtuous, or things that are worthy of approval. Do we see these things online and on social media? And do we act in a way that encourages them to grow? Remember, the point of this class is to be better at loving our neighbor. So, Do we encourage truth online and practice the truth in what we post and watch? Do we act noble, honorable, or dignified online and encourage others to do so as well? Are we innocent in our interactions online? And do we encourage others to be innocent as well? Are we pure or modest online in what we post, what type of attention that we seek, what we search for, what we look at? Is it modest? Is it pure? Are we lovely online? Do we practice the art of gratitude, and are we pleasing to others and with others in our interactions? Do we speak in a kindly spirit online? Or are we tempted to vilify others who don't agree with us? And do we practice excellence? And do we seek things that are praiseworthy? What type of environment does God expect for us to surround ourselves with? And are we doing that? Or does the environment we find ourselves in different? The second part of this passage is verse 9. So open up there again to Philippians 4, this time verse 9, and follow along as we read. Whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put it into practice, and the God of peace will be with you. You know, it's interesting here what Paul is encouraging the church at Philippi and us by extension to do today. The first part of this passage was all about what we fill our minds, and therefore talking about our online environments with, some of which include the actions and words of others. But this second part is all about what we say and do in those online environments. So what is it that we should do? Whatever it is that we have learned or been given from or seen in Paul in this passage. And it's interesting, this isn't the only passage where Paul encourages the church or his readers to emulate him. In fact, Paul said in 1 Corinthians 10, verses 31 through chapter 11 and verse 1, so whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do it all for the glory of God. Do not cause anyone to stumble, whether Jews or Greeks, or the church of God, even as I try to please everyone in every way, for I'm not seeking my own good, but the good of many, so that they might be saved. And then in chapter 11, verse 1, follow my example as I follow the example of Christ. Paul is banking hard on his reputation and what others have seen in him, in both the church in Philippi and then back in the church at Corinth. The challenge for us today is, given our online interactions, posts, search history, comments, etc., would we be just as confident telling other people to do as we have done? That's a difficult question. But if I was bold enough and brave enough to answer, I'd have to venture to say, no way. And that's the rub. That's where we all need to change. And right now, I'm challenging you here, right here, to be better online. And it couldn't come at a more important time with what's going on in the world. You know, we are social creatures. When you take away or limit the face-to-face interaction that we have on the daily basis, we quickly replace it with something else. What have you replaced it with? And is it worth copying? So what does this have to do with loving your neighbor or being kind on social media? Well, it's our jobs to make it easier for those around us to make good choices. We need to make sure that we don't fill up other people's environments with things that are going to bring them down, but rather fill our shared environment with things that are true, noble, right, pure, lovely, admirable, excellent, and praiseworthy. And it's possible to do that online. I know many of you are trying to do that. Many of you are trying to be that light on a hill, trying to add salt to a tasteless world online. And I encourage you to keep doing it and look for additional ways. But maybe some of you haven't really thought of it that way before, especially during what's going on right now. Maybe you've not really thought much about what you've been posting. But I believe that with a little bit of intentionality, a little bit of time, a little bit of study and prayer, you can do amazing and wonderful things to bring glory to God and encourage others. Love your neighbor by being like Jesus. Love your neighbor by living out your online presence in a way that's worthy to be imitated. Well, that's all for today's lesson on loving your neighbor, being kind on social media. Know that I'm praying for you, and know that I hope you have an amazing day.